Something that is just a weird fear of mine is doctors pretending to be doctors. Like not actually having their licensure, but just playing the role, and secretly killing people while doing so. And yes, this has happened before. The most haunted hotel in America is known as the Crescent Hotel. I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, but I loved staying up at night watching ghost hunters. I would run around with my little EMF detector seeing if I could find ghosts myself. While my favorite episode of Ghost Hunters actually covered the Crescent. They ended up actually making contact with one of the ghosts, but I never really deep dived into how creepy this hotel's history actually is. So the Crescent Hotel was built in 1986. And it was a resort for the wealthy, rich and powerful, but pretty fast they found this whole hotel to be very unmanageable. And it was weirdly very accident prone in the building process. There was a stonemason named Michael who passed away, but we'll get to that later. Well, it reopened in 1908 as a college for girls. This photo gives me very much Midsummer vibes. While this college was considered prestige, they covered up a death. Well, one of the girls in this conservatory ended up falling for a guy. She ended up getting pregnant, and it was a huge deal during this time to be unwed and pregnant. On top of this, her dad forbade her from being with him. So she threw herself off the top of the building. The college completely covered it up, went about their business, and kept up with their high-priced tuition. But they only lasted until 1924. While all the way in Iowa, a man named Norman Baker was a radio host. Very eccentric, had a big personality, and while there isn't a whole lot of information on how he came to this conclusion, he decided that he was going to be a doctor, without any kind of license or experience. He claimed that he had discovered a variety of cures to numerous diseases, but it didn't take long for Iowa to figure out that he did not have the medical training, so they ran him out. Well, Mr. Baker was not giving up. And on his ventures where he could find a new place where he could cure people, he came across the Crescent. And in 1937, he opened the Baker's Cancer Curing Hospital. Hundreds of people checked into this hospital and hundreds did not check out. It honestly breaks my heart because so many sick and desperate people showed up to his hospital because he literally claimed that he had the cure. But what his cure was injections from a mixture of glycerin, alcohol, and tea from watermelon seeds and clover leaves. And these injections were apparently extremely painful and happening 5 to 7 times a day. Patients would be in severe pain. And when they started to get extremely sick, they would be separated off from everyone else in an annex that was once used as the servants' quarters from the hotel before. And to give some perspective on the creepiness of the hotel today, that place is now a suite that you can spend the night in. And Mr. Baker was considered to have killed about 300 people because there's 300 names that were never checked out. And he actually killed them indirectly because he made his nurses do all the injections. He actually couldn't stand the sight of any medical procedure. He somehow got recognized by the American Medical Association and ended up making millions in today's money. And after people would pass away, he would take them down to the morgue, which is now the basement of the hotel. So you can still go down to this basement and look at all the gurneys, the wheelchairs, the medical equipment, along with a ton of jars. Some of these are filled with his concoction, some are filled with human remains. And as they've continued to build along the area, they have found more of Norman's things. Just as recent as 2019, they were excavating the area and ended up finding 500 items that included more jars filled with human remains like tumors and also more of his little cure. As you can imagine, with all of the death that happened here, this place is extremely haunted. Listed as being one of the top hotels you don't want to stay at. There's so many accounts of people staying here and talking about their experience along with photos online, and people sharing just how frightening it is. Well, besties, I think we should go stay there. It's only 3 hours away from me, so I'm gonna get in the car and I'm gonna go drive. And I will be vlogging my experience for YouTube, which is linked in my bio. But in the meantime, if you want to hear about the specific ghosts that haunt this hotel, go to my Instagram, go to the middle Reels tab. It's really interesting and you get to learn how people outside of the hospital passed away. How would you react if you were in your hotel room and some of the furniture started to move around? And then you walk out your door to go to leave and you hear a baby crying from the hallway, only to walk out and see absolutely nothing. Well, this is a common experience at the Skirvin Hotel. And while I'm a big fan of ghost hunting and don't really get scared too easily, it is so unsettling to know that so many NBA players will not come back into this hotel again after experiencing paranormal activity. So why is this place so terrifying? Well, the Skirvin Hotel is older than a century. It was built back in 1910 and located in Oklahoma City. The founder of the hotel, William Balzer Skirvin, really wanted a glamorous hotel. It was Prohibition during this time, alcohol was still illegal, and this hotel became a booming speakeasy. On top of this, his daughter Promesta ended up becoming the ambassador to Luxembourg under Harry Truman. So she brought in so much clout. This hotel quickly got a reputation nationally. But this is when Mr. Skirvin decided to have an affair, which created a horror story. So W.B. Skirvin is described as a man who really liked to have a good time, he liked to drink, he would also chase women. And somewhere along this, he ended up falling for one of his hotel maids named Effie. And while this man was a widower, you still have to remember that this is the early 1900s. So when the affair started, it was extremely scandalous. And Effie ended up getting pregnant. So Mr. Skirvin is like, oh my gosh, I did not just get a maid pregnant. I need to prevent a scandal. And his answer was to lock her in a room on the 10th floor. So Effie stayed in this room until she got to full term, had her baby, and remained locked away. Slowly, she lost her sanity and grew more and more depressed, and ended up grabbing her infant and throwing herself along with her baby out of the window of the 10th floor. And from this moment on, so many things have been reported around the hotel, including furniture moving around at night, people just feeling an eerie weight on their chest, and because no one could get a decent night's sleep in it, they closed in 1988, but reopened later. So the hotel ended up reopening in 2007, and the reports continued of a baby crying in the hallway, and guests in the hotel would walk out and not see anything. And so many men that have stayed there have reported hearing a female voice in their rooms, or also seeing the figure of a naked woman while taking a shower. And it was really blown up whenever basketball players started to stay there when they would play in OKC. Derrick Rose, who grew up in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in Chicago, couldn't spend one night in there without making James Johnson share a room with him. Ron Artest actually thought about filing charges against the Skirvin because the ghost was inappropriately touching him. And Kyrie Irving will most likely be making a movie about the hotel. And Eddie Curry was literally on the 10th floor and had to spend the night in Nate Robinson's room because he got so scared. This man is literally like 7 feet. So it really makes me feel like there's something very scary going on. So my best friend and I will be hopping in our car and going down to check out this hotel. So imagine you are having severe back pain and you decide to put your trust in a doctor. He's a new doctor, he's confident, says that he's never made any mistakes before, and claims that he can take your pain away. So you agree to have surgery. It seems that everyone around this doctor really likes him. So you agree in hopes that the surgery is going to provide some sort of relief. However, you wake up after surgery and you've lost the ability to move your legs. Was this spinal cord injury just a medical mishap? Or did this doctor intentionally try to kill you? Well, Dr. Christopher Daniel Dunch, a former neurosurgeon working in Dallas, ended up getting the nickname of Dr. Death. 33 out of 38 of his patients were seriously injured and 2 were killed. His reputation was so dangerous that they are literally about to come out with a TV series based on how terrifying his true story is, which you guys should definitely go watch on Peacock. But how exactly did this man get here? Well, Christopher Dunch was born in Montana on April 3rd of 1971. He graduated from a small Christian college and then decided that he'd go to medical school in Memphis. So Christopher Dunch had such a promising beginning. He ended up getting into the University of Tennessee Health Science Center, and during his time there, he ran labs, raised millions of dollars in grant funding. He was listed as one of 3 inventors on a successful patent, and he also gave a stem cell research tour to the governor of Tennessee. And while this seems amazing, there was already some issues. He ended up giving himself more credit than what was due for those patents, as opposed to his partners who were trying to create cells from culture to eliminate the need for human extraction. Also later on his resume, he ended up saying that he graduated from St. Jude's Children's Hospital, getting a doctorate in microbiology whenever they said they didn't even have that program at that time. But it didn't take him long to set his sights on neurosurgery. Because of how hard being a neurosurgeon is, you're required to participate in around 1,000 surgeries during your residency. But during his 4th year, he was sent to an impaired physicians program, which usually happens when you're suspected of being under the influence during operation. And this occurred during his 4th year. After graduating, he worked with some biotech startups, and then moved to Dallas, got a job at Baylor, and started to operate. The way that the other surgeons describe him there is being very much arrogant. He would talk about how amazing he was, even though he was so new to the field. And several of his surgeries ended up botched. A medical investigator came to see him as a patient, and after his surgery, he experienced chronic pain and limited mobility. Another male patient came to see him and was literally left with bone fragments in his spinal canal, eventually losing all function in his left side. And not to mention one of his best friends, Jerry Summers, came to see him for his surgery because he had chronic pain due to a car accident, which ended up rendering him quadriplegic. So the people at Baylor limited him to minor surgeries only. And then a mom of 2 girls came to see him for a routine surgery, in which she lost so much blood that she lost her life. And during the operation, Dr. Dunce ignored that anything was going wrong. He just continued the surgery. So Baylor was absolutely done with him and kicked him out. So he moved on to Dallas Medical Center. He ended up getting temporary privileges until they received his records from Baylor. This was a huge mistake. So at this new surgery center, he literally lasted for less than a week. His privileges were pulled after he killed yet another patient and paralyzed another. And this is when Dr. Henderson steps in. He's a longtime spine surgeon, and he ends up having to do corrective surgery on 2 of Dunch's patients. And he's literally so horrified with his work that he thinks he's an imposter. So he faxed a photo of the doctor over to the University of Tennessee just to check. And it really started to seem like he knew what not to do and was doing it on purpose. Anyone with a basic anatomy class would have done better. Since he was only temporary, the hospital was not required to report him. And Dr. Dunch ended up getting 2 more jobs after this, and severely hurting more people. One was left temporarily paralyzed but with permanent pain. And the other one, he mistook a neck muscle for a tumor and cut a hole in his esophagus and left a surgical sponge in his throat. And the surgeon that came in to pick up the pieces afterwards referred to Dr. Duff as a crazed maniac, and even said that it was clear that he was trying to kill his patient. It was obvious Texas was going to have to find a way to remove his license.